Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to offer you a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar when we are at home with Jane Findlay, our new president. Jane is at home in Sutton Coldfield in the presidential attic, and I'd like to say hello and welcome to this webinar. You've now been president for 14 days, and your first official duties were at the two CPD days that we did last week. So welcome, and I'd just like to say, how are you feeling so far after your first 2 weeks as president?
Hi, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it's been a fun-packed 2 weeks. It's been really busy. It started ramping up, to be fair, in June, and it's just taken off the last couple of weeks. But I really enjoyed doing the CPD day last week days. They were very successful, and I thoroughly enjoyed all the speakers. It was great, and some good outcomes. So I went away from that feeling very enthusiastic.
Brilliant. You've been, as is normal with a president, you've spent a year on the board of trustees, and I just wondered, as president-elect, and I just wondered if you'd like to say a few words about your impressions of your time with the LI.
Well, my involvement with the LI has been quite on the periphery for a number of years. So I've done things like been external examiner, and I've worked on the professional review groups for Birmingham City University for a few years, and I enjoyed that and sort of that interface between the practitioner and the institute. And then I had an opportunity to sit on the employers group for the Trailblazer Apprenticeships, and I just thought it was a wonderful opportunity, and that's how I sort of got to know the institute a bit more, and that sort of piqued my interest. And then I obviously jumped in the deep end as president-elect, and it was quite daunting at first. The whole sort of governance structure and all the quite formal and legal charitable issues were far more than I ever thought, but I think I'm getting to grips with it now. But it's been really interesting, and it's been a fantastic change from just being a practitioner, so I've really enjoyed it so far.
Brilliant. Tell us what you're most looking forward to.
Well, I was most looking forward to getting out and meeting people and sort of spreading the word, but I've now started doing it from my attic room, and I seem to be spending a lot of time on Zoom. So I hope the next 2 years isn't going to be me quarantined here upstairs with 2 screens to view the world through. But no, I would really like to make a difference, and I think as a sort of, I've been a practitioner for a long time now. I just know how difficult it is to run a business, to be a designer, and all the challenges of construction. And I would hope that I could bring that to the role and yeah, get our voices heard. It's all about relevance and the relevance of our profession, and I think that is so important because we've always been seen as being a bit of a nice to have rather than a must have. And I think this now is a fantastic opportunity for us with the changes with climate change and COVID. The whole situation has changed so much. It gives us an opportunity to be heard. And I think that's what I'll try my best to do over the next 2 years.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to take you back before we look forward and ask you to talk a little bit about your early career and education. And my killer question is, tell us how you got interested in landscape.
Oh, wow. Well, I've always been quite an outdoors sort of person, and I've always been quite artistic as well. So when I was at school, I was always drawn between the sciences and arts, and I find it very difficult to put my finger on a profession that I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to train as a professional rather than just do a subject for the sake of doing a subject. Yeah. And I had an opportunity to go and talk to somebody at the Forestry Commission when I had just chosen my A-levels, which were a right mix of arts and sciences. And I sort of thought, I've been thinking about planning, I've been thinking about architecture. And I just started talking to this particular chap at the Forestry Commission who suggested landscape architecture because, of course, at that time, Dame Sylvia Crowe, I think she'd probably retired from the Forestry Commission, but of course she'd spent a career advising the Forestry Commission on how to design forests in a landscape setting that reduced the impact of the forestry industry. And that really was interesting for me. And I then started to investigate the different schools of landscape architecture. And I ended up going to Leeds Polytechnic, as it was then, and it's Leeds Beckett now. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really good. It started off like an arts foundation course and it became more technical. And I thought it was great. It just suited me, my geography and my art and biology. That was fantastic. Yeah.
And while you were studying, tell me who or what most impressed you, just in terms of people or the areas that you studied.
I think I was quite blown away by some of the historic figures who were great plants people, the likes of Gertrude Jekyll and Vita Sackville-West, who designed Sissinghurst and was a great writer of plants. And I think that developed my interest in plants, which I've held ever since. And I was also very taken by Dame Sylvia Crowe, particularly she came and visited us when we were students. We were all in complete awe of this woman. She was very elderly then, but she was fantastic, and she was so enthusiastic that she sort of made us all want to go out there and change the world. And I've sort of followed her somewhat through my career. So I worked on a project that she worked on many years ago at Trosveneth Power Station, and then it was seeing her name on the presidential list in the boardroom at the PLI that made me sort of really think about having a go in the elections for this role. So, but yeah, she's been a big influence in my life, really.
I'm really interested because obviously her reputation was made with projects like basically the first generation of nuclear power stations, and then projects like the massive Cumberland Basin in Bristol. And there was that huge post-war generation of projects. How much did that kind of really massive scale landscape project also influence your thinking?
Well, what impressed me about Dame Sylvia is the fact that she could go from very large scale right down to detail. And I think that landscape architects can do that. So I've always been interested in the big complex projects, and I have done that, but I'd also like to see the planting done properly. And so I spend a lot of time in the office talking to our team about plant combinations, and we do CPDs about that, because I think we have to be able to do the whole. I know you have your skills and your specialisms, but I think you have to have an appreciation of the whole. But yeah, it was really impressive to see some of the scale of projects that she and her contemporaries undertook. It's quite fascinating. I'm not sure that I mean, I think now there are some great infrastructure projects that people are undertaking where we can still have that same influence. And I think the same philosophy continues, that sort of striving to reduce the impact and do the best for the countryside and for people who are going to be impacted by those projects too.
I hope many of our viewers will have read the article that you wrote in the most recent edition of the journal, so I must do a plug for the journal. But what was really fascinating is you wrote about your own garden, which we'll come on to in a moment, but you also kindly supplied some of your favourite landscapes, so that, in a sense, natural, if any landscape is natural, but anyway, not specifically designed landscapes. And I just wondered if you'd like to highlight one or two that have really had either had a huge impact on you, or where you just keep going back for inspiration.
Yeah, it's probably, I love walking and hill walking, and I do a lot of that with my husband Phil and with our friends. And Snowdonia is always the go-to place. If it's not the Peak District, which is just up the road from us, it's Snowdonia. So we love going there any time of the year, and it's just that getting away from it all. And the other place, which is another getaway from it all, is the Isles of Scilly. I just love it there. It's my little piece of heaven. And it's one of the few places that we continuously go back to. It's so serene and tranquil. And I take my paints and my sketchbooks and we go off walking, doing the tea rooms and a bit of painting and paddling. It's just lovely.
Brilliant. And which have most influenced you in terms of your professional practice?
Oh gosh, interesting. That's difficult to say. I think looking at the shapes of probably when going into the natural countryside like Snowdonia and seeing the big shapes and the way the land forms makes you have a big appreciation of how the geography plays a role in our projects. And I think that love of geology and geography feeds through into my work and has done, most definitely.
And in terms of your areas of work, I know that you've often talked about your particular interest in public health, and we'll get onto that from a policy point of view in a moment. But can you just talk about one or two projects which have had a very large scale public health content, or where that's been at the centre of that work?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work I do a lot of work actually in healthcare, so it might be small healthcare, whether it's palliative care or mental health work, or it could be big acute master planning of acute hospitals. And the sort of projects that we've been doing can have a huge impact on the users, the people who use those hospitals and spaces, and also the staff who work there as well, and also being able to attract the best staff. A lot of the NHS facilities are pretty poor, so we try and create the best places for people to work as well as to be treated in. And we've done some fantastic healthcare work over particularly the last 20 years. And we recently finished a project in Dumfries and Galloway, which is, the hospital stitches the sort of the countryside and the town together, and this fantastic views, and making sure the hospital sat in the landscape to reduce its impact. But also we've been working on the Royal Liverpool Hospital in the heart of the city, and that was sort of repairing a whole piece of the city, a whole quarter that's been badly damaged by very poor development over the last 30 or 40 years, and trying to stitch together the public realm and the interconnectivity with the city centre and with the university, and make it a real destination place, somewhere where the practitioners can be very proud of working as well and would want to work there. So that's been an important one. And another very important project I worked on was many years ago. I worked for the Ministry of Defence. We did a big project for the Defence Procurement Executive in Bristol, and that was a 100-acre site on the edge of Filton. And trying to accommodate 6,000 people who didn't want to go and work there. They were working all over the country and were going to be co-located to this new headquarters. And so we were trying to design a place where it would again attract and retain people, but also to provide, and this is in the 1990s, workspace, an outdoor workspace to promote healthy habits, people going out at lunchtime, bringing the wildlife right into the site, and so you could see it from the windows. And they even ended up setting up a bird spotting club as a result of it, and big lakes. And it was a fantastic project, and I learned so much from that I then took on to other projects I worked on.
Do you think, it's really interesting because the LI published its position paper on health, public health, and 6 years ago, and we've done quite a lot in work on the magazine on that. But do you think there is adequate recognition of the role that landscape practitioners have in promoting good health?
No, I don't think so, because people talk about buildings as promoting good health, and I think we could do more. And I think there's so much more research now which and can underpin our work, and if we use that evidence base for our design projects, I just think it makes it more realistic, and it makes it it justifies what you do. And in these this day and age where money comes into almost everything, an engineer says you've got to have this structure, otherwise the building doesn't stand up, and I can prove it by doing these calculations. If we can say that we put in great connections with nature, and the patient or can look out of a window and actually get better and leave hospital a day early, that's thousands of pounds of cost, you know. So sadly it's got to, sometimes it has to come down to that, but that is really important way of justifying what we do, I think.
Brilliant. Now, I was going to ask you about your favourite small-scale project, but this seems to be a perfect moment to talk about your very own small-scale project.
Okay.
And this is the exciting bit where we try and upload a video, because that's always the moment on Zoom. But what if you'd like to upload your video, and this is a video where, Jane, you're going to do the live commentary, and just perhaps give us a bit of an explanation of what we are looking at.
And can you see this now, Paul?
I can, yes, indeed.
So I'll start playing it and let's see what happens. So this is my garden here in Sutton Coldfields. It's we live in an Edwardian house, and it's got a very long, thin garden at the back of the house, north facing, so it makes life difficult. So we've designed it as a sort of series of rooms and put in quite a bit of structural planting. There are one or two gaps now because we are always fiddling around with it and experimenting with plants. It's one time I had a huge number of shrubs in here, and then I took them all out and put in a whole load of perennials. But the one thing that I really love are hostas, and I have a collection of over 70 different types of hostas. So I've got small leaf ones, large leaf ones, I've got every variety you can imagine, pretty much, not every variety, but a lot of varieties. And I just love them. And I just think the combination of textures and colors are just so lovely. So this, we're now walking through the yew hedge, which divides the garden up into a second sort of area. And then I've got a greenhouse where all the action goes on, and my growing area where I've got lots of plants on the go for both the garden and for the allotment. Right at the bottom of the garden, Phil has his man shed, so there's 2 or 3 sheds at the bottom, and all the compost heaps, so I keep him down there out of the way. And sorry, Phil, I think he's watching this downstairs now. So
okay, excellent.
Yeah, so this is a view now. We're looking back up to the house, and you can see we've got a green roof over the top of our little extension there, and a pond which is full of frogs and newts and things. But you probably gathered I quite like lots of textures. So putting the hostas next to other plants like brunnera and other perennials, lamiums and so on. I just love those contrasts, they're just beautiful. A few of the hostas I've actually put in for various horticultural shows, and won, surprisingly. So no, I love my garden, and it's been an absolute bonus to have it this year, of course. Spent a lot of time pottering in here, particularly after I've done a few Zoom meetings. And we've got a green wall as well. We call it the green bookcases because all the plants cascade off. Yeah. So there's my presidential chair. I had a photograph taken in the chair, and I've had lots of comments about it. So Phil made that, which is he's very good at woodwork. So from the garden, we go up to the allotment, which was 2 or 3 miles from where we live. And we've had the allotment for about 4 years now. And it's purely for growing vegetables on. And we operate a 4-course crop rotation. As you can see, we've got some good sweet corn on the go. And the other thing in our lives is growing competition sweet peas. So these these are them in full bloom. They're not quite so good now. They've been battered by the wind and the rain, but yeah, we enter them for competitions. So it's quite satisfying, actually. It brings out a real competitive edge to people. And probably the other area that we love is our woodland. So it's on the way on the A40 between Gloucester and Ross-on-Wye. And we put camera traps up in our woodland. You can see here there's a small deer, and we've captured some wonderful wildlife. But it's just a lovely place to go, and where it was ash with hazel coppice, and the hazel had become very overgrown, and we are managing it, trying to bring it back to trying to tidy it up a bit. It's got a little bit, we think we've got a bit of ash dye back in there now, but we're restoring the hazel coppice, and Phil is a man of two chainsaws, and he particularly enjoys cutting trees down. But we've got a huge badger set on the site, which is just amazing. And every now and again they try and they dig new holes and tunnels. So yeah, it's always fun putting the camera traps up. You never know what you're going to get. And we've built a cabin in the woods, so it's a place where we can store things and shelter from the rain if we want to. So yeah, it's been good fun. We haven't finished it yet.
Yeah.
But we will. So I'll stop that. That's the end of that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So it seemed to work. So that's.
It did. You all saw
brilliant.
It properly. I did wonder whether it started juddering. So.
No, it seemed to work. So that's really wonderful. So that gives some sense of where you are, what you're doing. But obviously, being a president is a very demanding role. And one thing that fascinates me is that normally a president will issue their manifesto, and they will identify a particular subject, and they will say, this is what I want to do. We're going to focus this year on water or housing. You've significantly raised issues that we will come on to, particularly around diversity and progress within the profession. But equally, no sooner are you the president than you are focusing on not only some of the most astonishing changes in our communal life, but so many of those changes also are playing themselves out quite literally in the public space, in the public realm. And so on Thursday and Friday, there were debates around streets, around street space, about the changing use of parks. So we have debates about equality, about diversity, and about who gets access to what. And we are seeing them not discussed in Parliament, but literally in the street, in the public space. And I wondered I just wondered what your thoughts are, because this is a really fascinating, but obviously a very, very complicated position for anyone to be in.
I know it's being dropped in the deep end to some degree, because it's almost when things like COVID came up and the Black Lives Matter, it's sort of having to react rather than being able to be proactive about something. And normally a president would be quite proactive, set out what they want to do and just get on and do it. And I'm having to be reactive. But having said that, the things that are coming up, actually, my manifesto fits the issues, and I think it's because those issues are so important. They've always been there. It's just with the current situation is shining a spotlight onto it that we've never had before. Mm-hmm. And so the issues of access to public space and the importance of public space, and that it hasn't been equal, and those who most disadvantaged have the worst access. All of those issues were there before, and now people are talking about it. It's in the public psyche, and I think that's a huge benefit to us, for those of us who are advocating the importance of green open space. And if we can't maximize and put ourselves into the foreground as actually having some of the answers. I don't say we've got all of them, but we've got some of the answers. When can we? I think this is a really important time for landscape architects, and it's not just me standing up there and making noise about it. It's everybody doing their bit. We've all got to be pushing to get ourselves heard and to demonstrate just how good we are at doing these things. And we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's our domain. This is what we're good at, and we need to show our skills in that light now. So I think it's an important time for our profession. And whilst I didn't expect it to be like this, I think it's probably a good thing. And I'm willing to take up the challenge.
Brilliant.
I have to, even if it is from my attic.
Even if it is from your attic. One thing that you've said previously is that you are, I think you're only number 5, only the 5th woman to be president in the space of 90 years, which is a pretty extraordinary position. We're also a profession which has just about gender balance, but that clearly that's at the beginning. It doesn't carry on as people progress. What are your thoughts on addressing that issue?
Well, I think it's improved some. When I first came into the profession, I would often be the only woman in a meeting, so I would never fully appreciate how different it might be if there were more women there. Actually, I was on the receiving end of quite a few sexist comments, and I had to fight quite hard to, in a nice way, to sort of be able to progress up. I had to sort of work as hard, if not harder, than other colleagues, particularly as part of a big architectural practice, which was very male dominated. All the partners were men, all the associates bar one were men. And myself and Sue Radley were the only 2 female associates or directors, and it was hard at times. I think they used to think us as being the landscape girls, and it was all a bit derogatory in that respect. I think it has improved, but I still think there are issues when women go on to maternity leave and take time off, and if they want to come back as part-time, because they're part-time, they don't get taken as seriously as the full-timers. And I think that is still an issue, and I don't think that some employers are as good as others for pulling them and encouraging them to progress to the highest levels. And I think we all have to look at ourselves as employers as to how we can do more to help young women.
You've raised a very interesting issue, because obviously the LI is a professional body with a membership, and it has 2 sorts of membership: individual members and registered practices. But then the profession is made up of those registered practices and individuals. So how much work do you think you might do specifically with our registered practices?
Well, as an employer myself and a business owner, I think this is where there should be a better relationship between the LI and the business owners. And in fact, Dan Cook and I are hopefully in the next month are going to set up a number of breakfast meetings with the registered practices, and to hear what their concerns are, what their challenges are, and to see how the Institute can do more to support businesses, because generally we're all normally, many of us are smaller businesses. We're not like, or we are small departments in very large businesses, which is actually very similar. And I think we learn our skills on the job, but I think it's a hard and lonely life being a business owner or being a senior manager. And I think any help that we can get with regard to skills or business support, I think that's where the LI, I think, could really offer more to the registered practices.
Okay, and one area that the LI has taken a very clear stand on has been in its declaration of a climate emergency last June. So in fact, that basically coincided with you joining the board. And then about 6 to 7 months later, we published our climate emergency and biodiversity emergent action plan. And what's fascinating is some of that applies to us as individuals, some of that applies to us as organizations, but equally it applies to our members and our registered practices. So what do you think might be the best way of working with individuals and registered practices to address climate emergency?
Well, I think we're all in this together. That's the starting point. And I think as individuals, we probably all have a deep concern about the planet and the impacts of climate change. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to pull together to do the right thing and to make sure that our businesses are green and that our practices, the way we practice, are green, the way we specify and the way we design. I think that training and compulsory CPD is a really good way forward. I think we need to learn the skills, and I think that formalizing that is really good. And I don't mean it's just for the younger members of the team. I think it's the business owners also have to be on board. And I think sometimes business owners can sort of sit back and think, well, I've done all this, I'm just running the business now. But I think it's important that we all make sure that our skills are up to date. And I think we need to come together as a group and maybe compare notes on how we're all doing things individually and learn from each other. I think perhaps some working groups would be really useful on that, because we all do our business in a slightly different way, and we learn from other built environment colleagues that we all work with. And there's nothing like information share, really. I think it'd be a good way forward.
In the older days, a president would go to meetings and go to AGMs and would, go to ceremonies, and people would talk to you, like, have a cup of coffee or shake your hand or have a glass of wine. And so much of what a president does is about not only talking but listening to members of a professional body. And I just wondered, what are your thoughts on how to still do this even in your attic?
Well, Paul, you might have noticed that I don't really have a problem when it comes to talking. Being a Scouser, it comes sort of quite naturally to me. But already I've participated in so many meetings, Zoom, various other platforms as well, that connection is still out there. But I think what I'm missing at the moment are those sort of accidental and chance meetings that you have with people when you bump into somebody and have a conversation. And I'm trying to think about how we can do something more like that. It can be quite stilted on Zoom, where people have to take turns to speak. But I do hope we come out of lockdown at some point and we can get back together again, because I am keen to get out there and talk to people. I want to hear what people have got to say and what they think, and I want to try and represent people best, our members, the best I can. So if people want to get in touch, I'm quite accessible on social media.
Oh, brilliant.
Don't bombard me in the middle of the night, but please access me on social media. But I'm happy to talk to people as well.
And presumably you're also happy for people to invite you to events, even though they are online events.
Say it again, sorry, Paul.
I presume you're happy for people to invite you to events wherever they're taking place, even though they may, and you don't even get a cup of coffee after them. Also, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of, you've got your presidency lasts for 2 years. We've got 2 big areas of work that you've alluded to already, which is around apprenticeships and entry standards. Do you want to say a word about some of the areas coming up that we should be taking note of, or just keeping in our diaries?
Yeah, well, I think the apprenticeships are an amazing opportunity to improve our diversity and to encourage young people into the profession to be educated in a different way, to learn on the job, really. And it's something I was quite passionate about, and that's why I got involved in it. And I think Christine Hurst and the team have done a fabulous job of actually getting the level 3 technician grade apprenticeship sorted, so it's all ready to go. And there are some schools ready to deliver that. Some of the colleges are ready to go on that one. And of course, there's the level 7, which is the chartered landscape professional.
Do you want to just explain the 2 levels? Because I've never completely worked it out.
So level 3 is the landscape technician level, which I've always thought that we should have a grade of landscape technician, because we all employ a number of people who don't want to be a full-on landscape architect, but have complementary skill sets, whether it's in CAD or surveying or drafting or planting design or whatever it might be. And this is an opportunity to be properly recognised, to have proper training, and to be a member of the institute. And of course, level 7 is the chartered landscape architect, landscape professional, which means you can be a landscape architect, a landscape parks manager, landscape manager. There's lots of landscape planner, there's lots of different directions you can go in, and that also feeds into the competency framework as well. So the two are well aligned in that respect. But I do think the apprenticeships are a great opportunity, and we need to get to the school leavers and make sure that they know all about it, because with the emphasis on environment and climate change and health and well-being, there might be a lot of kids out there who would be interested in doing a job in landscape. I
mean, we launched Choose Landscape exactly 2 years ago. Do you think now that we've got the apprenticeships, we should maybe looking at, in a sense, another version of this that emphasizes the message that, in fact, there is a much wider potential group of people who could choose a landscape career?
I think you're right, Paul. I think the Choose Landscape campaign is fantastic, and it should continue in one form or another, because we're only as good, whether you're working in public sector or private sector, we're only as good as the young people who other people who are coming into the profession, who are training to come in. And we want the best. We want the good students. We want students who are enthusiastic and talented. And that then raises the whole profile of our own profession. If we've got good people coming through, the quality of our work improves. And we're then become a respected construction professional, rather than just somebody who's putting a bit of, a few Latin names around a building. So I think it's really important. It's the lifeblood, and the Institute needs more members, and that's a good way of doing it, isn't it?
Now, you've mentioned the public sector, and I suddenly remember that when I came into post, the membership was divided 50-50 between public and private. That's now something like 80-20. So there's been a massive change. And I just wondered but on the other hand, just over the past few months, there's been this sudden massive government investment in the public world, rather quickly, this investment. So it's a very topsy-turvy world. So again, it's maybe an unfair question, but how do we address the needs of our public sector members, but also the potential of the public sector to commission, because obviously it is significantly a commissioner of landscape schemes. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I have great sympathy with the public sector, because I've worked for 2 local authorities in my early years, and it is a difficult sector to be in. And I think the decrease in numbers, though, following austerity, has just been a tragedy, which means that there are a lot of planning applications going through where the landscape elements of them are not being properly tested and reviewed by landscape architects in the public sector. And in the 1980s and 90s, there was a real boom of landscape architects in the public sector, though there were some huge local authorities. I know Sandwell and Birmingham City Council both had enormous departments, and now they've whittled down. I think Birmingham's still pretty good, but Sandwell, I'm not sure if there's any left. But I think we need people in the public sector, as you rightly say, to commission work, but also it's to develop strategies. Who's going to develop the green space strategies for cities? How are we going to green our streets? How are we going to provide the quality public realm? Who is going to own that? Because it's not going to be the private developers who are going to do that. The strategies need to come from the local authorities. And then you need talented people in the local authorities to come up with those big ideas and to make sure they're delivered. And that's key, absolutely key.
Do you think, I mean, one very fascinating thing is there's been a complete rearrangement of many, many streets. But now you see an awful lot of Harris fencing and traffic cones. And it's all happened really quickly. And what is the role of the landscape professional in trying to persuade traffic officers, local authority officers generally, even under pressure, even in an emergency, to do something benign with this emergency landscape?
I think my concern is there's a rush to quickly create the spaces, and that will become, they'll just stay, that nothing decent will be done. They've ticked the box, we've got that amount of space for those pavements, we've reduced the width of the road, and we've introduced a bike lane, and the terrace fencing and the cones could end up staying. Or they've just sort of big drinking areas outside, pubs and that sort of thing. And you see on the continent, the Spanish and the Germans have already started to do some really nice parklets. They're still temporary, but they're much higher quality. And if we want to give people the confidence to go out, I think we've got to create really good space. And this comes back to the High Streets Task Force. More so than ever, the high streets need revitalising, and just putting up traffic cones and Harris fencing is not going to do it for most people. They want to go somewhere nice. And if we want people to go back into the high streets and the shops aren't there, we've got to do something outside that's going to be attractive.
I'm just wondering if this is the beginning of a whole new campaign. Like, if you can't have a Lidl on your high street, at least have a decent horticultural landscape, or maybe an orchard. You know, clearly, maybe this is one of those very rare moments when everything is so chaotic that there is a chance to do things that you'd like to do but might not have been able to do normally. Is that?
You know, I wish the British public would ask for more, to be more discerning about things and not just accept the lowest common denominator. You know, we've done work for schools when the schools actually say things like, "Oh, this is too good for us," and you think, no, this is what you should have. And I think the British public actually deserve more. The public realm has been so underfunded for decades now, and it really is coming home to roost. But my biggest worry is where's the money going to come from? Because everybody is looking for some money from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The local authorities haven't got any money, so how do we fund all of this? And I think that is a really big question, and I haven't got the answer to it just yet. Okay,
well, that's fair. So, but my other question, as we come near the end of this discussion, is really about, well, I've got to say 2 years, 10 years from now, when we are celebrating our centenary, what would you like to look back on? What do you hope the organisation will have achieved in that? I mean, it's a burden for your successors as well as you, but what would you have liked to have achieved over that period?
Yeah, well, I hope in 10 years' time that we've got over COVID and we're all living a happier, healthier and greener lifestyle. But I would like to think that we are a fully respected and appreciated construction profession, that we are the go-to individuals and companies and local authorities, that we're held in high esteem, and when there is need for advice, that they will come to us, and it won't just be going to architects or going to engineers. It'll have to be going to the landscape professional as well. And I would like to think that we've risen a few steps on that ladder of relevance, and that we're taken seriously. I think we're better than we used to be, but we've still got a long way to go. And I'd like to think that in 10 years' time that we'll have made that difference.
Brilliant. Now, we're coming to the end of this discussion, but one thing that people often forget is that presidents also work for their companies or themselves. And I just wondered if you'd like to say a word about, you haven't talked about your own practice, but they're all sat there either watching you or getting on with their work.
They are.
So if they're allowed 5 minutes just to listen to you, I just wondered if you had any thoughts about them and your relationship with them over the next 2 years.
Yeah, well, as I think I told you in the past, Paul, we came out of a big architectural practice, and it was quite a convulsion as they went into an administration. We had to reform our group quite quickly in the 1990s. So we've got a good team, people who've been with us for years, and we've brought people on and we've encouraged them to move up the ladder, so to speak. So we've got a good mix of men and women in our practice, and they've let me step back, which has been brilliant. And they're going to carry on the day-to-day operations of the practice, so that I can help them where I can. I will, but without them I couldn't have done this. So I really appreciate them giving me the time to do it. So thanks, guys. You're stars, the lot of
Brilliant.
you.
And any other closing comments that you'd like to make, just about what we should look forward to or what you hope for over the next couple of weeks, couple of months?
Yeah, I know. So there's a lot on in the next couple of months. So I've more than hit the ground running. So I'm looking forward to meeting as many people as I can. I want to hear your concerns. I want to be able to make all of your lives as easy as possible as far as the Institute helping you is concerned. And I think it's going to be a real challenge. I really acknowledge that it's going to be a difficult time, but I'll do my best. And I don't want to be considered to be remembered as the lockdown president, but I probably will be. So I do exist. I'm not a figment of anybody's imagination, even though I'm seen on a flat screen television. So I really do exist in real life. But I look forward to meeting everybody soon, I hope.
Great. Well, I very much hope we can all get together in the real world over the next few months. And for the moment, thank you very, very much for spending some time online. Thank you very much.
No, thanks very much, Paul. And thanks everybody else for tuning in today. Really appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Thank you then. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.